Hello and welcome along to another edition of Beyond the Boundary. This week I've got with me a man who's no stranger to Emirates Old Trafford, former Director of Cricket here at Lancashire. It's Ashley Giles. Ashley, good day to you, and it's really good that you've taken time out to come and say hello to us. Do you still have good feelings about the old place?
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure to come back to Emirates Old Trafford, to Lancashire. Actually, my wife and I often talk about my time here, which is only 2 years, but 2 really important years in my career. But my wife, Stina, always comments that I was incredibly well looked after here, really well looked after and welcomed by everyone at the club. So really fond memories, of working with everyone from, you guys who were on the board, right through all the coaching staff and the players. And it was also a great privilege. It's a fabulous ground, fabulous history. And I feel really privileged, as I say, to have worked with 2 of the biggest clubs in the country in Warwickshire and Lancashire.
Yeah, I mean, your time here came after a spell with England as one-day international coach. And I think at the time you were very much of the mind that you didn't want to just coach. You wanted to try and step up and move into a sort of directorship type role. Would that be true?
Absolutely, yeah, spot on. And at the same time, I started a master's course, a degree course in sport directorship here in Manchester. I've always wanted to sort of broaden my horizons or push my boundaries as to what I could do and my experiences. I love coaching. I still love coaching. And in many ways, that's the bit I missed and miss, is that one-to-one connection you get with a player on sort of taking him on that journey from A to B, or a team from A to B. Clearly, when you make that step to directorship, you are slightly more removed, and you've got to be more removed because your role is different. It's more strategic. It's more broad. But and Lancashire was certainly a good learning curve for that for me, because I was both coach and also stepping into the boardroom.
I was going to say that it was an important step for you because you were ostensibly still doing a fair amount of coaching. So there was still that one-to-one and team liaison type role. And I think you probably, I don't think you'd be exaggerating to say that you laid the foundations along with Glenn Chappell of this current squad. Although you look back to 2015, there are very few players that played in the T20 final that are still here now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did see it was important transition years, I think, for Lancashire, and we both worked through that in bringing some of these young players through, giving them opportunities, as well as making sure you looked after those very solid citizens you have in a dressing room, and some of them are still playing. I mean, Crofty's still out there, which is extraordinary.
It is.
Great credit to him as
and playing as well as ever this summer.
But yeah, I really enjoyed that, and actually when I look back, because my first role at Warwickshire was both sort of coach and director, and that was a similar role to I had here. And in many ways, they're the most enjoyable because you get the best of both. It's very challenging, and in the modern world, with the amount of cricket we're playing in the different competitions, very difficult. But I did enjoy that role.
And when you were in that role, in that time, we're going back 7-8 years now, how important was it to you to develop the next layer of talent, if you like, to look at the way the academy and the age group structure was set up?
Yeah, it always has been, and was, and is still. I think that's the fundamental bit of our cricket, both our clubs and internationally. We've got to be, in an ideal world, looking at a strategy that's long term, that's sustainable over a long period. And I've always tried to, and probably maybe sometimes to my detriment, move away from quick fixes and winning tomorrow. Sometimes you have to do that. You have to be aware of that. It's still not always possible. But I've always wanted to. I'd rather build over years than months, because I think that's better from a sort of legacy piece, to leave something behind, even if when you're gone, that structure remains and grows, and hopefully Lancashire's got a bit of that. I hope, and I certainly think, looking at the Warwickshire squad as well, that I went back to. I suppose what we did, myself and Jim Troughton, and then now Paul Farbrace coming in, have built a squad that has had success and hopefully will over a long period.
Well, I think you're quite right with Warwickshire, but I think you're also right with that Lancashire have done that, and that it's been a club policy to develop academy and their own talent, and that's self-evident when you look at the sides that are playing now. But when you were in charge, I think probably the two standouts that came through in your time here were Liam Livingstone and Hashim Hamid.
Yeah, and both fantastic players.
You sort of you championed Liam a little bit, didn't you? You got him into the side, and batted him lower middle order initially,
and in a very different role. And Hass was is a different customer altogether. Yeah. But I hope one of the things I did, because Lancashire has got such a wide net of talent and available talent.
It's a huge area, isn't it?
A huge area.
The whole of the Northwest.
And there's a huge amount of talent that's always come through your academies and youth systems. It's almost creating the opportunity for that talent. And so I think Liam was a good example where, yes, when he first came in the side, he batted 7 and got runs. But I think in good sides or in mature sides, you allow yourself to do that, is to play a player that you might not be sure about, but actually it should be the senior players around him that pick up the slack. And if he does well, it's a bonus. But if he doesn't, he'll learn and he'll grow from that. But you're not expecting someone to come in and smash it up from ball one.
That's the ideal scenario, isn't it? To fit your 1 or 2 highly talented youngsters into a framework that contains some solid senior professionals.
Absolutely. That's the difference between mature and immature teams. It's not them as personalities, it's them as a group. The amount of cricket they've played. And my experiences, even going back as a player at Warwickshire in the early 90s, were exactly the same. That I was able to go into a team that had success, that knew its game, and not feel the pressure of having to get 5 wickets every time I bowled or runs. But if I did, it was a bonus. But I was learning from the best as well. It was, I think they're the best environments to work in.
Plenty of commentators, the public, supporters say, well, you've got to give the youngsters a chance. But you can't give them all a chance at the same time, because that just leads to inexperience and not almost inevitably, but very often failure.
Absolutely. You can ruin them. You can burn youngsters, and getting that timing right. So sometimes you put people in. I think back then, even Saqib was another example who we played, but always with the mind, well, you might have to pull them out. It might not be quite ready, but you want to. I'd rather err on the side of giving them an opportunity to pull them back than never knowing, just sitting on the sidelines. But it's got to be in a controlled way that doesn't, as I say, and you said, burn them.
Do you think our county system, from a county perspective, allows the development of talent to come through sufficiently? And I'm not necessarily pointing this towards England.
Yeah.
Whilst everybody probably admits that the county system is there to try and provide England players of the future, it would have to do that. Would be part of it, but it has to stand on its own 2 feet as well, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. So. And
is it set up to do that now?
Well, if I just talk about that, I think I always saw my role as a head coach, director of cricket, and I think you did as 2-pronged. You absolutely your responsibility to try and win things for that county. That's why you're there, and that's what you're being paid for. But we also have a responsibility to try and produce England cricketers, and you've got to try and move these 2 things along together, which isn't always possible. And there are times when the short-term pressures become really big. And so the choices between playing a young player, giving him opportunities, giving him time, perhaps, are somewhat conflicted by winning tomorrow. And I think many of the counties have faced that problem. Many of the directors of cricket have faced that problem. And in a system that has promotion, relegation, not saying that's right or wrong. We're not going to get into that debate, I don't think. But it can place those pressures.
Well, there are so many different variables and systems that are promoted, proposed, talked about in terms of divisional cricket for the county championship, whether it should be 3 6s, 10 and 8 as we've got now, or 12 and 6, or whatever. I mean, you can talk, and we've been talking about this in my lifetime in cricket, sort of 45 years, never come to perhaps a satisfactory conclusion. But having said that, you're probably ideally positioned now and placed, having spent enough time in the county game and having an elevated position in England, within the England setup, to realise that there is always going to be a bit of a conflict between county and England.
Always.
And I'm not sure how you can get over that.
Well, yeah, and I'm not sure, but I made the point during the winter, which I don't mind repeating, is that there's got to be, both sides have got to come together on this. There's got to be collaboration on what the best thing for the English game as a whole is. At the moment, I'm not sure those things are aligned. We're obviously playing a lot of cricket, a lot of different formats of cricket, and I think we've got to... I mean, ultimately for Championship cricket, which is what we're here for, which I'm watching today, which is great, because we're watching two good teams on a good pitch at a great ground. You know, it's really, really going to be... It's tough cricket. I think we've got to find a way to play more Championship cricket spread through the summer. You know, we, again, probably spend an hour or 2 hours working out how we might do that, but we've got to find a way to do that.
Well, I hear what you say, and I'm encouraged by the county cricket that I've seen already this summer. We've been blessed with a dryish April. And the only thing that I will say that you would perhaps need that we haven't had so far is a bit more pace in the pitches. I think the pitch has been pretty good generally, runs scored, and it's hard work for bowlers to take 20 wickets in a match.
Yeah.
So you've just said it. We're Lancashire, Warwickshire, 1 and 2 in the county championship last year on a test match pitch, basically. This is the sort of cricket that the selectors should be looking at and making decisions from, in my view.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. This feels to me to be the top, and this wouldn't be the only game in the country, but this is the sort of top end of cricket. I think your point around pitches is a good one, the pacing pitches. And I think if we spread 4-day cricket throughout the summer a bit more, we'd have more variance or variation in that, and you probably have more pace later in the year. There's no doubt the weather actually in April is pretty good.
Generally.
It's generally pretty good. And we've got some very good groundsmen who can prepare very good pitches. But they're still going to lack some pace at this. You know, you'd have to be a magician to get them rock hard and flying through at this point. And we know, well, what you want to do is play on varying pitches in varying conditions. But at the very top end, yeah, you want some pace and some carry, and guys who can bend their backs being rewarded for doing that over long periods on generally good wickets, good surfaces.
If you had a magic wand, and you've already said we need to try and play more 4-day cricket in the summer, I think there are 5 games actually in June and July this year, which is not bad, better than it has been. But if you had a magic wand, would you continue with all forms of the game that there are now? I think it's a given that we've got to carry on with 100 because you know the amount of money and time and effort and marketing and that has gone into that. I think I'm answering my own question. I think T20 cricket's essential for the counties, and we've got to play 4-day cricket. So we've got to try and fit it all in. Absolutely. And that's the eternal question.
It is, and then 50-over cricket. You know, we've got a World Cup coming up next year. We're world champions, and whilst in this current generation it won't have such an impact, but if we're continuing to play World Cups that are 50 overs, And there is a chance some of the next generation of players won't even play 50 over cricket. And I know that the way we set up for our 50 over cricket, which is fantastic, is more suited to the shorter format anyway. But I suppose if I had a magic wand, what would I do? I'd still find a way to play a more consistent, championship cricket through the summer.
So blocks, basically.
But I would, and this is me talking, I would think about, how we could do the T20 slightly differently. It's a very good competition. The quality of cricket's good. But could we play that? I know it goes against this, what we moved to in not swapping formats all the time. But maybe a more appointment to view once a week, Friday or Saturday night.
Let's just make it clear here. There's no agenda in this discussion. This is Paul and Ashley having a chat. So it's personal views. It's interesting what you say about 50 over cricket, because one of your the finer achievements, I think, in recent years was to be head of England cricket when we won the World Cup in 2019. And you talk about 50 over cricket. I remember covering the 2015 World Cup out in Australia and New Zealand. And prior to that, it was thought and mooted that this might be the last World Cup of 50 over cricket.
Yeah.
And it was New Zealand coming along and McCullum playing the way he did and challenging the norms of 50 over that reinvigorated the game, which was great.
Yeah.
And that probably sparked England, because we'd been perennial failures from way back in the 70s. We'd never won it. So it was time we did, and we did. So basically, did that consume your thoughts in your England role at the time?
Well, year one, certainly. That was my first year in the job, was leading into the World Cup. And most of that preparation had been done by Strauss, Morgan, Bayliss leading into that. But I felt great pressure in getting that over the line. We went into that as favourites. There was a period through that tournament where we looked like we may not even make semi-finals. And so, my job then is almost just trying to support, pull everyone together, make sure we're staying on track, which I know, Owen Morgan and Owen's going to do. Trev was still very relaxed, but my
job
always
is to appeared very
that.
Relaxed, Trevor.
Yeah, incredible. And I think that sort of came to head before the India group game at Edgbaston, and I think the guys sat down and said, what are we worried about here? We know there's the expectation. We know we all have those personal worries about what might not happen, and we've been on that journey. Let's just play the way we've been playing and go out and play with that confidence and in an aggressive way, and can't fault them. It's obviously a bit twitchy, and looking at strategy, that strategy that was probably over 5 years in the making, or 4 years in the making, we still only won on the last ball of the tournament of a super over.
On a countback.
So that's how tight it is. So that had to be the strategy, and but whatever. I guess I'm not going to say too much about it. Whatever one hand gives, you lose something.
Well, I was going to come on to a more general point, really, about prioritising, whether you're in charge of a county or you're in charge of an international team. There is so much cricket played.
Yeah.
There are so many different tournaments, so many different series, so many different forms of the game, that the hardest thing, I think, must be to treat each game, match, series with equanimity.
Yeah.
It's impossible, because you have to have a priority at some point.
Yeah, so firstly, from a county point of view, and this is just my experience again, would be to, we start every season with the high hopes, we challenge for everything. And then I think as the season ebbs and flows, sometimes you're surprised. So for us, when I was at Warwickshire, the 11 season, the way playing championship cricket, finished runners-up to you guys, to Lancs, and then 1 in 12, was a bit of a surprise the way we took this uptick. but our white ball cricket dropped off. I think the way, us winning T20 in 15 here, we struggled through some of the group stages, but peaked at the right time, and you sort of put your foot on the throat. With England, absolutely, we've had to, Test cricket, however we've played, whatever results have been like, has always been one of our priorities. It's just the conditions we faced on and off the field with COVID and everything else, and the opposition we faced on the field have been really challenging. But certainly in white ball cricket, after the 19 World Cup, we made the choice with 2 T20 World Cups coming up to make that switch to prioritise T20 cricket, to be able to challenge for a T20 World Cup or a World Cup. We knew we wanted to go into it as best in the world. So whereas I think when I came on, we were third in the world in T20 cricket, third or fourth. We got ourselves to number one in the world, got in a good position. Our 50 over went from first in the world to second in the world, but that was a strategic decision that we didn't have a 50 over World Cup for a few years, focus on T20, and so we're happy with that. And, barring a couple of overs that went wrong in the UAE, we played some really good cricket in that World Cup and could have been double white ball champions. But so in that terms, there's a lot of thought goes into the prioritisation.
Do you think that in England we have this? It's a preoccupation, but do we have too much emphasis on Australia and the Ashes? Or is it right to do that?
It's clearly an emotional series, a very important series. And
you played in one of the best Ashes series of all time in 2005. And,
it has.
I played in 81.
Yeah.
So, both iconic series
amazing.
in a way.
And huge historical importance. But because of that, they almost become watershed moments. The fallout from the last series, again, we won't go into too much, but generally happens around World Cups and Ashes because they're deemed as the most important thing. There's emotion, there's the history, etc., etc. And now we live in an environment that is just craves 24-hour news, and sometimes there's got to be change. There's something's got to happen, but there is a lot of importance placed in those series. And I think going back to something we talked about just a minute ago, it's becoming more and more difficult. I think in any sport, and cricket, and particularly county cricket, was probably immune from that a few years ago, to set your target about building long term. I've got a 5-year plan. Well, you might not get 5 years. You've got to win next year. Instant
success.
Yeah. And that leads you to making some decisions that maybe you wouldn't in other cases.
That's an interesting point. I mean, the public demands success. Players want success. They're not in the game a long time, are they? They don't want to be necessarily part of a side that's going to win in 5 years because they might not be playing then.
Yeah.
So it's a very difficult balancing act. Having said all that, you put yourself, I think, where you wanted to be. Your aim through your formative years at Warwickshire, then as an England one-day coach, and then with Lancashire and then Warwickshire, you wanted to be at the top of the tree.
Yeah.
You won't have any regrets about that, even though things perhaps haven't worked out quite as well as you would have liked.
Absolutely. I've always set about what, and again, where you look at where you've come from, your journey in cricket, all the things you've achieved. I look at mine. I still feel very privileged to have worked in the environments I've worked in and do the jobs I've done. And I wanted to work at that level, of course. The last 2 or 3 years have been the most challenging because of some of these circumstances we talked about, particularly with COVID, and challenging not just for me, but for everyone involved in that system, whether it be, the board, chief exec level, the coaches, players, everyone. It's been incredibly challenging, and at the county level as well. But no regrets. I think I'm sort of 3 months down the line of coming out of that role now. It's I've actually had a nice chance to reflect, and I feel fresher for it. I think there's some challenging times ahead for everyone still. But it's I love cricket. It's it's an amazing environment to work in. But we'll see what the future has in store.
So, having been at the top of the tree in terms of coaching director of cricket work,
Yeah.
what does the future hold for Ashley Giles? Does he want to try and continue in that? Does he want to move into perhaps another sport? Or would you be happy perhaps getting back to grassroots and saying, I'm just a coach now. I'd like to have another go at coaching?
Yeah, well, I think that's the process I'm still going through at the moment, which is great.
Yeah.
I've got some time to do that thinking, but when I reflect, I have done all of those roles. I've been a head coach, I've been a director of cricket, I've been the sort of national selector, I've been a one-day international coach, I've been the more director suit sort of role, and MD. So I have a lot of experience across cricket. Cricket is, the world's a massive place. The cricket world's quite small. It's the sort of, it always reminds me of going to Lord's for the test match. You always see the same faces, don't you? The same characters wherever you turn. That's what the cricket world's a bit like. So the moment, I certainly haven't fallen out of love with cricket. As I just said, I love cricket. So it could be cricket, could be going into form management, coaching. I'm pretty much open at the moment, but I'm also open to looking outside the box and working across sports, across countries, because ultimately the things we work with, Walt, are the fundamental thing is good people, structures, strategy. But I think the people thing's the most important thing. You get the right people around you, you've got a chance.
Ashley, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to chat to you for half an hour or so. We could probably have gone on for hours and hours and hours, but I'm glad to see you have come out of your England experience okay, and you're looking refreshed. And who knows what the future holds.
Thank you very much.
So thanks, Ashley, and we'll see you again soon on Beyond the Boundary.